Ladies and gentlemen, I'm StaticYonder. Welcome back to another Minecraft video. Today it's going to be something a little bit different. So, you guys might remember a little series I did called Nebulous, and in that series I had a variety of different starships. The series was a mishmash of my favourite shows at the time, which were Red Dwarf and Futurama. I decided to take the two, mash them together, and add a little bit of my own twist and create my own sort of cinematic style series. So I'm joined here today by Cheesinator Games, also known as Henry.
Cheese knife.
Also known as Henry, holding a golden cheese knife, of course, of which I have one myself. But I decided to rebuild a ship from Nebulous. You guys may or may not know of it or recognise it, but for those of you who do, you already know what this is. This is the S.S.Centurion. So, in the Nebulous episodes, the S.S.Centurion and Back to the Nebulous, our main characters, Robert Ratinsky and Ace Hampton, are seen having to evacuate the SS Nebulous due to a neutron star that is about to collide with the Nebulous. The Nebulous plots an escape course, but it was supposed to be a 50-50, so there was a 50% chance that the escape route would fail, the Nebulous would get dragged into the star's gravitational pull and be torn apart. So as a precaution, the crew, at the time the only active crew were Ace and Robert, had to evacuate the Nebulous in a pod, which they did. Their pod then ends up being intercepted by a ship on autopilot known as the S.S.Centurion. The two intrepid adventurers decide to board and see what's going on, and they eventually discover that the S.S.Centurion is a science, research and exploration vessel run by a company. Let's try that again. Run by a company called Spire Corporation, and the ship's crew, as it's later revealed in a security video, had to evacuate the S.S.Centurion because they slipped into a dimension of space that was hostile and should have torn the ship apart, but it didn't. The S.S.Centurion survived. However, unfortunately, the crew did indeed evacuate using the pods on the top and bottom of the Centurion and were never seen or heard from again, as they evacuated after entering the dimension and ended up stuck there for all eternity. Fucking smart idea. But anyway, this is the rebuild of the S.S.Centurion. So, as you guys may or may not realise, it's actually considerably larger than the original. This will be evidenced by the cockpit. I will just put a side-by-side of this cockpit and the original. As you can probably tell, the new cockpit is 7 blocks wide, whereas the original was 5. Quick note, I don't know why I originally said the cockpit viewports were 5 and 7 blocks wide respectively. I guess I miscounted. The original viewport was only 7 blocks wide, and the new one is 9 blocks wide, as you can see in the image here. Thank you, and back to the video. Blocks wide. I've basically scaled up the Centurion completely, so it's still got the same dimensions as the original, only larger. I've also rebuilt the pod that Ace and Rob used to escape the Nebulous, and I can safely say this version is far superior to the original. Now, I've used nether brick stairs to create some texture to this pod, and whilst it doesn't look too bad, the original Nebulous texture pack retextured the nether brick stairs to be stained clay stairs, basically, or in this case, red terracotta. So those stairs would have been basically the same texture as the rest of the ship. But honestly, doesn't look too bad. So let's start with the pod, because obviously in the Nebulous episode, this is where we begin our adventure with the S.S.Centurion. You guys might also notice that there is no boarding arm for this version of the Centurion. Instead, we have actual docking ports. That was the original idea. Unfortunately, because I built the Centurion so small in the original version, there was no space to add docking ports or anything like that, so we had to add a docking arm and a gangway to allow people to come off of the Nebulous pod onto the Centurion. Also, a bit behind the scenes, the pod was built before the Centurion. We built the Centurion around the pod. So, in this case, we've gone the other way around and we've built the pod around the Centurion, the way nature intended. So, we'll start with the pod. As you can probably see on the side, for some strange reason, there's black stone walls. Now, these act as blast doors. So, blast door open. Yeah. Blast door open. Blast door half closed. Blast door closed. Or even blast door open. Blast door half open. Blast door fully open. If we had the right plugins and mods, we could make them open properly, but obviously not. So let's board and get inside. So you guys may remember that the original pod had, or may not remember, check out the video if you haven't seen it before. Yeah. The original... shameless plug. The original engine section of the pod had levers to activate the redstone lamps at the back. Instead of that, this time we've put redstone blocks inside. Which I did not do in the original because it looked tacky. Instead, this time what I've done is as I've got more space in the pod, the original pod was also considerably smaller, about half the size, I've added these stained glazed terracotta to look as like techie as possible, and I put 2 levers on it instead of 1 lever on each block like the original. Here you can see a little computer console. These are littered throughout the Centurion, but there's one on the Nebulous pod, obviously, because that's just to regulate the engines and stuff. You've got a furnace here for cooking, you've got beds for the people who are escaping the Nebulous, and you've got more glazed terracotta there to act more again as like a techie console. Control lever, like a joystick to fly the ship, to fly the pod, and another like computer type thing here. Would you like to board the Centurion with me, Henry?
Yes, let's do it.
So Henry is going to be our reaction, if you will. So you guys, he hasn't seen this yet, so he'll be discovering this at the same time as all of you at home. So we'll just close the door, and without further ado, let's board. So the first thing you might notice when we board is there's grindstones either side of the door. These are supposed to be shield projectors. So the packed ice you can see, packed ice you can see in between them is supposed to be the force field. So these things work entirely by force field. Problem is, if the power fails, everything gets sucked out into space. But you know, design flaws. Obviously, I think there'd be a bulkhead door somewhere in there in case that happens. But you know, it's Minecraft. We're limited as to what we can do. So
let the people die. It's fine.
Yeah, of course. Always let people die. That's life for you. So, as you guys may see, we've kept a feature from the original Centurion, which is these ladders to access the pods. So that's the original way of accessing the pods, as in Nebulous, and it still is to this day. I have yet to furnish... Hi! How you doing?
Your house in here.
Yeah, me too. Wait, I'm homeless. No. But I've yet to furnish these. The originals had very, very basic furnishings. So will these, but they will be a little bit more organised. So you'll have a chest here, a furnace there, and a bed there, and all that stuff. And it'll be the same in each pod.
Awesome.
To facilitate survival, as these pods, which are affectionately known as living pods, are pods that are designed to act as small exploration ships that can detach from the mothership, the Centurion, and explore planets with the Centurion staying in orbit for whatever reason, be it to take readings, to do science, or something else, orbit the planet for whatever reason. So, yeah. So, as you can see, I think we'll work back to front. So, the rear section, the rearmost section of the main body of the Centurion is the cargo hold. So, as you can see here, we've got chests and everything. They don't actually have anything in, and barrels and all of that. I have also toyed with the idea of adding some sort of crane in here, but basically this is the section of the Centurion that holds everything. I also had the idea to add a door in the floor that would act as a door that could pull things up from a planet, you know, so say they land on a planet, they can literally land on their cargo and pull it in. So yeah, so back here is where all of the crew's personal effects will be kept. This is where all their food supplies, rations and backups would be. And yeah, probably the armory as well. I guess this bit might function as an armory. So, we're going to go into probably the most dangerous room aboard, Henry. This is the engine room. So, back here you can see, this connects directly to the engines. We've got a little computer here. Yeah, we've got smokers there to function as like computer bits and lodestone that looks like a computer. And in there we've got some kind of power source, which is a beacon with end rods attached, that powers the engines for the ship. And I guess this is more of a reactor room than an engine room, because
I was just saying it's more reactor.
It's more of a reactor that powers the whole ship, including the engines. As you can see, we've got some shroom light, some chains, and water pipes, as with the original Nebulous, the quote-unquote liquid antimatter of the original Nebulous. In this case, it's coolant. In canon, as far as Nebulous goes, it's coolant. Ace Hampton doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. So, this is the reactor/engine room. Awesome. Everything that would be controlled. Climate control, I guess, would happen from back here, you know. on board the ship, keep everybody nice and toasty or nice and cool in the summer. And artificial gravity, I suppose, could also be controlled from this console. And engines, basically, this is the power room.
Unwind in no gravity.
Yeah, exactly. So, if we walk through this bulkhead,
Do not like me today.
I know. So we're now back in the center of the ship. Now here there isn't really much going on except for this. If it were a carrier of sorts, this would be the hangar, but it's not. So obviously you've got the stairways leading to each pod, and then in here we have the guns. So you may have seen on the outside. I'll just pop outside now. Let me just break my way through the ship.
I will also do the same.
As you guys may see, there are some broadsiding cannons here. Cannons designed for broadside attacks on other ships. Obviously, the Centurion is not a war vessel, but it's also... It can take care of itself. The Centurion is an exploration vessel, so if it ever does have to come into contact with anybody, it can handle itself. You may also see there are 2 more turrets up here, and mirrored. Everything is mirrored on the bottom, so everything that's on the top is on the bottom. That's what makes the Centurion symmetrical, so you've got 2 on the bottom as well. If we fly back to the front, you guys may also know that these large panels that were present on the original have also been upscaled. The original, they were supposed to be what I called solar acceleration guns, which are is basically just a fancy word for radiation cannons or something silly.
Oh, cool.
I don't know, but I've turned them into actual cannons. They may look silly. Yeah, but they are what makes the Centurion. So I've decided to scale them up and turn them into actual weapons. And of course you've got 2 more guns under here. So if the Centurion ever does come into trouble, generally speaking, its best tactic would be to go straight head on against anything it's fighting, because that's where its main armaments are. And in the story, I suppose, in the canon version of what we're coming up with here, these cannons on the top and the bottom are swivels, so if they do fly headfirst at something, those 8 guns overall, so...
I was going to say it'd be a bit of a design flaw if you...
Well, it would be... Yeah. It'd be 8 guns overall, 4 on the front, 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom, so they can swivel, they can fire in all directions. The pods themselves are also supposed to have a gun each, because of course they can fly around independently of the Centurion. So, for this room... This is where... Oh shit, I broke through the wrong bit there. This is where they are controlled. So, you have 1 pod for each gun, and obviously it says caution live ordnance in use. 2 more docking areas here, but basically the Centurion would be designed to dock with other ships to onload and offload scientific equipment and supplies and stuff like that. So, to the front of the ship in the neck, we have... on the left side, crew quarters. And the Centurion, to man every single position aboard, requires a crew of 14. Now, whilst that's a very small crew, obviously that's really the minimum crew to man every position aboard. So that's the guns, the helm, which we're about to show you, and each pod. And I guess each pod would count as its own living space, so... we have surplus to requirement. We can have a maximum crew of, I would say a maximum functional crew of 50. The reason I say that is due to the size of the ship. Obviously, you'd have people who are responsible for the cargo, people who are responsible for the chef as well. For the next room I'm going to show you, the kitchen. So this is the kitchen. Sink.
My favourite place.
Yeah, composter, ovens, and a chest. So yeah, there you go. Welcome to the kitchen, or as Henry just put it, the bathroom. So if you come into, I know. So if we get to the end section of the neck, which is the scientific research laboratory. I haven't really come up with much for this yet because again, using default Minecraft blocks is a little bit difficult. But you've got the Aperture Science style, like arrowed pathways that tell you where to go. I just thought it was a nice nod to Portal and science and stuff. Got a water cooler here, Red Labs brand. And you've got some computers doing some sciencey shit, so... yeah. Here we have the main bulkhead to the helm. So we'll come into the helm. So this is the helm, or the bridge. We've got control consoles for all sorts of people, but this is where the ship will be flown from. So you've got the first mate and all that stuff. The first mate, the pilot, the co-pilot, the captain. I guess the captain would stand here. But like most frigate-style ships, the S.S.Centurion is flown from a single control column, the same way an aircraft might be, but obviously it's crewed and manned by a larger crew to monitor all the systems. The last two things we have to show here are these gun control areas for the guns at the front, the large ears of the Centurion, if you will. Don't do that, they'll set it off. Honestly, you can't get the staff these days. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is the reborn Centurion from Nebulous Back to Earth, which is the first series. Dark Horizon got one episode before it all went down the toilet, and I have explained about all that before, and I'll probably do so again in another video at some point if you guys want me to narcissistically go back through my own history. But until then, this is the extent of what Nebulous is. Oh, you didn't destroy the world limit block, did you?
No.
Henry! So this is the extent of what Nebulous is these days. It's just me semi-narcissistically recreating the starships from Nebulous in a more realistic way, in the way that I wanted them to be. But obviously I was too young and too inexperienced to really do them justice. The last part of the ship I really have to show is something I'm extremely proud of, which I had no help with initially, and that's the engines. So the engine block for the Centurion originally was just this. Lamps, I know, right? Lamps sticking out the arse of the ship. Instead, this time we've actually given it a proper engine housing. So I decided to make the whole quartz thing, this little lip here, just a completely random open space above the engines. I put that there, but Lewis did help me. I put these fins in, and he thought it would be a great idea to add the ones here and here and all that stuff. I also created spines running up the entire length of the ship that go under, between the pods, and right the way to the front. And once you get to the front, the spine runs all the way along the top of the Centurion. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would consider this the definitive edition of the S.S.Centurion from Nebulous Back to Earth and Nebulous Dark Horizon. Unfortunately, the series never really got the justice it deserved. It never got the runtime it deserved, but it was something I created with friends as a young'un, as a teenager, as someone who was old enough to know better, young enough still to not have enough experience. So here it is in its final finished glory, ladies and gentlemen, the pride and joy of the Nebulous series, the S.S.Centurion. At its core, the Centurion was the first ship I really came up with on my own. The Nebulous, by its very name, was a kit bash of Red Dwarf and the Nimbus from Futurama. The red colour being a reference to Red Dwarf, and the large front of the Nebulous being a nod to the Nimbus from Futurama. Whereas Centurion, whilst it was loosely based off of some stuff from Star Wars, was genuinely the first thing I really came up with originally. But go check out Nebulous. It's a good series. It may be juvenile by my standards today, but it holds
a young Joe.
Yeah, but it holds a special place in my heart, and it always will. And I'm glad to have finally done not just the Centurion, but the friggin' pod attached to it justice. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. Maybe one day I'll remake the Nebulous even, I don't know. But until then, this is it. Thank you very much for watching. I will leave you guys with the enduring image of the Centurion flying away. Let's just have a little look at the S.S.Centurion Spire Corporation Exploration Frigate. So I'm going to do a cinematic pan of the Centurion flying away, which is an infamous closing shot from Nebulous, the S.S.Centurion.